Before I let you go, in fairness, workers would not see it the way that you just laid out. They would say that they're being strong-armed back to work. Minister, if they're being forced back to work with legislation, is that not how they would feel?
Man, oh man, oh man. Today we got a fiery one between a Liberal minister and Ctv Anchor, Mike something. I don't even know his name, honestly. Today they're going to be going back and forth about an exchange of the postal workers, Canada postal workers, going on strike. And once again, the Liberal government is stepping in and putting them back to work with legislation. But the Liberal minister is talking about how he's never forced anyone back to work and how it's vital and it's a case by case. And let's just react to it. Let's get into the video.
Now, you had spoken earlier about what is happening with Canada Post and, in a sense, how we got here. Now, Canada Post has asked your government to change its mandate to better make it more competitive and really shift in terms of what it does. Do you think that if your government had allowed it to make that shift, that we would be at this point right now?
Well, I'm the Minister of Labour, and my job is to be a go-between in some ways between the parties. I'm not the minister responsible for Canada Post or Canada Post management. I cannot really speak to the policy decisions that must be made on that. In fact, there's a sort of wall between me and the unique role that I play and those other decisions. Mike, Canadians are well aware that they face significant competitive challenges. At the same time, employees and their families at Canada Post have aspirations too, and those aspirations deserve to be aired at the bargaining table.
Right, because we haven't heard this before, that you're going to let them work it out at the bargaining table, and as soon as they get to the bargaining table and two parties disagree and have to go back and forth, as soon as it begins to ramp up in a little bit of antsiness, the Liberal government always steps in and shuts it down. And they shut it down not to the point of they're trying to have a negotiation that's reasonable for both sides. They shut it down and just tell you to get back to work and expect everyone to be happy with that negotiation that negotiation outcome. And just expect everyone to be smiling and go along amongst their life. When people have real issues they're dealing with financially and sometimes even physically, where they're just not able to work as hard or work anymore in Canada because the cost of living is just so extreme. And with the cost of living being so extreme, it's like at the same time, the mentality has gone down of the want to work in Canada or the want to even push harder to accomplish anything, when the harder you work, the less you make and the more you get taxed.
So you did intervene in a rail strike and a port strike. There's a court challenge now with the former. Are you confident that this method of forcing binding arbitration will hold up in court?
We faced a decision that we did not take lightly. No Minister of Labour ever takes intervention in these issues lightly. But in both cases, Mike, I wish to remind you that we were facing significant health and economic and other challenges to the Canadian economy are put at risk. No responsible Minister of Labour could decline the opportunity to protect Canadians, protect our economy, and yes, protect hundreds of thousands of union and other jobs.
I wanted to ask you, what do you say to those workers who voted for you in any of the previous elections, but especially when you guys came to power in 2015, saying that you would be a party that protects collective bargaining rights? It would seem that after legislating a number of different strikes, people back to work, that's not what you're showing. So what do you say to those people who say that you are not in favor of workers' rights?
I know exactly what he's about to say to them. A bunch of other lies that he's been talking. Liberals love to talk in circles, especially these Liberals in this government. They love to run you up the tree before they chop it right down on you and basically tell you everything that they were saying. Oh, we're still in the works, or it's still in process. Meanwhile, the tree's not there no more. Meanwhile, you're laying on the ground, struggling to survive, and they're saying, don't worry, it'll get better. Sunny days are around the corner. I just don't understand where the logic of how they think or how they even determine what they say is knowledgeable that people are going to believe. And they really go home like, yes, we've done well today, guys. Great plan. Like no plan has been done. They don't care about your rights because the only thing they care about is taxing you and making themselves look better on paper, which even that they're failing at.
I would say, look at our record. We've passed something that the union movement in this country has sought for decades, which is a ban on replacement workers, which will be in effect very soon.
In effect, but not active right now at all. So why are you bringing it up?
assured 10 sick days in the Canada Labour Code. Canada Labour Code is one of the most progressive, important pieces of labour legislation in the Western world, and we have worked within that, these disputes, to see if we cannot get to fair agreements, negotiated agreements, but do so without the anxiety that I find at times a little needless in terms of what it creates in terms of uncertainty for Canadians.
So I just want to get this right. So you are for workers' rights as long as it's in a timely fashion and that negotiations doesn't take long? Because that's what it sounds like you're saying.
That is exactly what he is saying. I'm glad this anchor called it out. Thank you. Round of applause for this guy.
Oh, no. Well, I would just say Canadians are reasonable people. Unions are reasonable. Employers are reasonable. We all want, in the end, a prosperous economy with well-compensated and safe workers. What I am saying is these processes have become heavy. They take a long time. They require enormous resources from all concerned. And I think there's a better way to alleviate the anxieties of workers and employers, and of course the people who rely on these companies or these services, so that we can get to fair agreements in a more expedited way, in a serious way, achieve objectives that may exist at the time for the parties involved.
Oh my gosh, the hypocrisy and the contradicting. Like, where do we begin? You want negotiations to be fair and to be reasonable so that both parties can come to terms, and you understand that they take a long time, but you also want the parties to come to terms at a reasonable time that's not affecting other Canadians and the way of life of the economy of Canada. Meanwhile, they're still working for the economy of Canada. Like, the hypocrisy, just talking in circles and not really answering any question. He's basically saying he's just going to keep stepping in and putting his foot down on any time you guys disagree and want more money and are taking longer than a week to 2 weeks on your negotiations. I'm going to step in and shut you guys down and bring legislation back to force you back to work. That's basically what he's summing up to you in a whole bunch of blah word salad.
Just before I let you go, in fairness, workers would not see it the way that you just laid out. They would say that they're being strong-armed back to work.
I don't know how that follows from what I just answered, Mike, but what I would say is that we take each of these.
Well, Minister, if they're being forced back to work with legislation, is that not how they would feel?
Well, we haven't forced anyone back to work with legislation in the recent past. We of course did.
Pardon me, or with a ministerial order. I mean, either way, they're being pushed back to work and not negotiating at the table.
Why is he playing semantics with the answer? Just answer!
As I mentioned, we take these things on a case-by-case basis, but we had two unprecedented events occur in this past year. In one case, both of our mainline railways. In the other case, the most important ports on both of our coasts that put at risk hundreds of thousands of union jobs and other jobs, farmers, families, livelihoods, and so no responsible government after such a prolonged period of negotiation can ignore the risks to our economy, to health, to safety for Canadians. And so we made what was the appropriate judgment at the time, and I stand by that.
All right, that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you, community. Thank you, Canucks. Thank you, world, for coming out and viewing. Like, subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments. Until next time.